Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous episode we implemented or used htmx to enable uninterrupted episode playback. So if I now click on an episode here and I use the search functionality, I can see all the search results and the playback is uninterrupted. But if I attempt to navigate to other places in the app, like the index page, the playback is interrupted because we're doing like a full page refresh. So I would like to use htmx to handle some of these other links to enable you to kind of browse through the app whilst these episodes are still playing. So looking at my views, the views that I want to change are the podcast detail view, the episode list view, and the subscription list view. I'm not really going to be too concerned with things like the authentication views for the time being. I think if you're poking around in there, you're not really on the main app, so yeah, we won't worry about them for the time being. And since these are kind of Django built-ins, we're going to have to override the template name using this get templates name method here. So I think if we do the subscription list, which is the main page, we can say def get template names, and we can say if self.request.htmx, and then we can return one thing, else we can return another thing. So the first thing we want to return, if it's not htmx, is the original subscription list that we're using. Subscription list html. Else we want to return a podcasts subscription list partial.html. Okay. So if I go over here, I'm just going to check everything's working. Template does not exist. Podcast, probably because it needs to be plural. Podcasts. Let's do a hard refresh. Okay, so it's loading the original template. So now I need to make it so when you navigate to this page, this link actually does hooks into like htmx. So looking here, this is like a regular href, do a full page refresh, but we need something like this trigger, so we want it triggered on click, and we want to do a hx get request, I guess, and replace the page like our previous search component. So let's try that in our base.html. I think here we're going to keep the href excuse me, just in case I have JavaScript disabled, so we can do get hx trigger is going to be on click, and the hx target, like previously, is going to be page like we had down here. So to test that that's working, let's just fully refresh the page, go to the episode page, and then try and navigate back. Nothing's happened because it's trying to look for this partial template, and that template doesn't exist. So excuse me, if we go to podcasts, templates, podcasts here, we can take this subscription list and create a new file and call this subscription list partial.html. If we open this, we can take content. Looks a bit funky here. I think this div should be inside there. But if we excuse me, if we take this content like this for loop basically, we can put this in the partial template, and then inside here we can say includes podcast subscription list partial.html. So to check if everything still works, we're going to navigate to the home page manually. Something's gone wrong. Includes. I've spelled that wrong. Maybe it's just include actually. Yeah, okay, so a hard page refresh works here. We click episodes, we click back, it still works, but this time it's using htmx to render the partial template. So How can we test this? We can click on the episode list. We can then play an episode.
At PyCon 2023,
and navigate back to the homepage, and episode playback continues. The episode page, the playback is still broken, so let's try and do the episode page now. So same again. I'm just going to go in here and provide this get template name method to return conditionally the right template, whether we're using htmx or not. Can't remember what we called this. We called this the episode list. So instead of subscription list, it's going to be episode list, and then episode list partial. So let's say add file episode list partial.html. Let's open the episode list partial, and same thing again. We're just going to steal this code, stick it in there, and then say include podcast episode list partial.html. Then we also need to remember to change the same thing we did here, but for the episode list. So right now we're using this href. We're using Django's built-in kind of template tag to look up the right thing. So maybe we can reuse this. So we can say the get again is going to be the URL for episode list. I know this is not very don't repeat yourself, but hey ho. And then the trigger is going to be click, and the target again is going to be page. So we're currently on the episodes page. We do a hard refresh, that still works. And if we click here, that still works. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. Again, how can we test that? We can play an episode.
At PyCon 2023,
we can navigate to the episode page, we can navigate to the index page. The only piece of the puzzle now is going to be the podcast detail page, which if we look in our views is the last one here. So let's just copy paste again. Maybe I could be a bit clever and say, okay, if it's htmx, then do some special string append partial to the end of it, but hey ho, for the time being this is fine. So we have here podcast detail, so we're going to have podcast detail, and then podcast detail partial.html. So again, just to check this still works, do a hard refresh, it should load the existing template. Here we probably now want to link to the partial, so let's just go to base. In fact, it's not base, is it? This is in the subscription list. For every link here, we then want to do our kind of hx get hx trigger and then the target. So let's just copy this code that we have in here, and inside this href we can add this, and potentially here we can say this is going to be the subscription podcast get absolute URL. Okay, let's try and refresh this page. Ooh, that was a weird redirect. Let's try and go to here. So now if we click this should do the htmx for us, and it's going to complain because the template doesn't exist. So again, add file, what did we call it? Podcast detail partial. We look in here, we look in here, we can steal again all this content for the podcast detail and stick it in the partial template. And I think here we can just say include podcast detail partial.html and cross our fingers and pray that this works. Do a hard refresh, click the page. Uh-oh, that's not good. Have we duplicated a content tag somewhere? This is podcast detail. podcast detail partial. Okay, yes. So we accidentally included the base HTML and block content. So we don't need you. So it's hard refresh. Episodes, index, podcast. That seems to work. So let's try and navigate through all the different views. Let's click this. Okay, so we are playing a podcast. Let's look at the episodes. Podcast still playing. Let's look at the index. Podcast still playing. Podcast still playing. Let's use the search. Podcast still playing. Wow, that's really cool. So with htmx, we've managed to allow kind of uninterrupted playback, and that's all without using like a front-end framework like Vue.js or React or Solid, and it's utilizing all just the kind of template logic that we already have. You could argue that there's a kind of bit of redundancy here. I might have a think offline about how I can solve some of this kind of duplication and maybe refactor out some of these methods here. But honestly, it's not been a whole lot of effort and quite easy to reason about. My only concern is I might miss some links in some places that still trigger like a hard refresh by accident. So yeah, I've been well impressed by this. Although you will note that whenever you try and click on these kind of views, it will initiate like a kind of hard refresh, which is fine. I don't want to have to go to the legwork of overriding some of these Django social auth views, because I don't really think it's worthwhile. Let's just double check what happens if I submit this form manually. I think that was still an outstanding bug. So if I start playback here.
At PyCon.
That seems like a bug as well. If I go here and start playing an episode
PyCon 2023
and submit this form, that's still kind of broken. So potentially inside base, inside this form, we can do the same thing. So maybe like a progressive enhancement kind of thing. We can also say hx.get there and hx.replace URL is true, along with the hx target as page. So let's see if that works. So from here, play an episode,
PyCon 2023, there was a section of the expo,
and yeah, so the form is still working. That's great. If you hit enter, that still works. We do stuff you should know and hit enter, that still works. Okay, so yeah, pretty happy with that. Alright guys, I'll see you in the next one.